Jesus wept. In Genesis, we see Jesus the Creator summoning light out of darkness and breathing life into this awesome creation, the universe. And throughout the Old Testament, we see God the warrior fighting for his people, the Israelites, bringing them into the promised land. And then in the New Testament, we see Jesus the victor, conquering death through death on a cross and rising again in glory. And then at the end times, in Revelation, we see God seated on high in all his splendour and all his majesty, surrounded by heavenly hosts in constant praise of him. But in John 11, at the death of Lazarus, we see Jesus the human, the God who weeps at the death of a friend. Nietzsche said that religion is a crutch for the weak, and I think we do often expect religion, God, to make us strong. But in fact, at the death of Lazarus, Jesus is overcome with emotion, to the point of tears. In verse 33, we read that when Jesus saw her, Mary, weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And later on in verse 38, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And in verse 35, Jesus wept. Because being a Christian doesn't mean being stoic about death and suffering. Spiritual maturity doesn't mean distancing yourself from the realities of suffering in the world. Jesus himself knew about death more than anyone else. He knew about the possibility of life after death. He was one with the Father, the source of all life. He knew that God could send people to heaven. He knew that he himself could raise Lazarus. Yet despite this incredible maturity about life and death, and despite this knowledge of the hope that is eternal life, Jesus reacted with the most human overflow of emotion at the death of Lazarus. Jesus was overcome with emotion. I worry that sometimes we might justify ignoring the social injustices in the world and the great suffering that's all around us because we think that as Christians we know about life after death. We might even deliberately block out our emotions. We might stop ourselves from being overcome by emotion because we might think that our calling is solely to cater for those in spiritual need. Jesus didn't just claim to be the resurrection and the life and then walk away. He wept, he healed those who were suffering, and he brought his friend back to life. So while Jesus was undoubtedly in the business of spiritual salvation, in this passage we see a very human side to Jesus. So this week, I challenge you to be more human. There's suffering in our world today that causes even the God of the universe to break down and to weep. Let's not be blind to them. William Wilberforce, the well-known Christian political activist, was overcome with emotion when he saw the plight of thousands of African men, women and children being shipped across the world as cargo during the slave trade. And he famously said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know." So this Saturday, we'd love for you to join us as we get together and we're going to watch Amazing Grace, which is one of my favourite films. And it tells the incredible story of how one broken-hearted God and one broken man brought hope to millions.